it's coming along. I've started the fort, well, not the construction, but I'm clearing a lot of brush, and I'll take you for a walk about. Before I get into that, so I thought I'd talk a wee bit of history about forts in the 18th century. Some worked and some didn't. For the most part, they did. Even though they look frail, you know, wooden palisades, you think, okay, they can easily breach them. But they didn't have artillery, they didn't have cannons, certainly the natives didn't, and even opposing forces, European forces, they couldn't get to these remote parts of the frontier with cannon. So they served a purpose. So first of all, one that didn't work, and it's called Fort Necessity. So we got George Washington, he knows he's going to be attacked by a much larger force of French and natives, so he builds this, I believe it was 53 feet across, this circular palisade. Mine's going to be much larger. He entrenches around the outside of it, and so July the 3rd, 1754, sees old George in a battle with the French. This is open confrontation between two European forces, and it's a torrential downpour on that day, July the 3rd. So he's got trenches around the outside, so he takes his men outside, but their powder just gets saturated, nothing will shoot. George is forced to capitulate. Now, when he's signing the treaty of capitulation, he doesn't speak French, and due to a very poor translator, George unwittingly signs a document that acknowledges his role in the killing of a French officer and his men, who were actually working just as dignitarians. They were carrying a message when this happened. This was previous to the battle. It was also called the Battle of the Great Meadows. Anyway, by signing that document and actually openly shooting at French forces, George starts the French and Indian Wars. And so that tiny little conflict in the Great Meadows, and it starts a worldwide 7-year conflict, and George is responsible for that. Now, the fort that really impresses me and that does work is Fort Henry. I need a drink of water, and I'll get into the history of that. So, Fort William Henry was originally called Fort Windcastle, and it was later renamed after Patrick Henry. Fort construction is started by an Ebenezer Zane, and you've probably heard the story of his daughter who runs for the powder and the natives are shooting at him and what have you. But the fort itself withstands 2 sieges. The first one in 77, and the one that really fascinates me is 1782. So the fort's manned by about 18 to 20 men. And along comes, let me think for a minute, George Gertie, so Simon Gertie's brother, and he's leading a group of 50 British Rangers, and they're accompanied by about 200 Delaware and Shawnee warriors. And now keep in mind, this small structure, it covers about a half an acre, so certainly much larger than I'm building, and mine's much larger than old George's Fort Necessity. It had 4 blockhouses in either corner, fairly high palisade walls, but can you? I try to visualize when the warning comes in, and you look over those walls and see 200 natives in war paint and 50 British. And old George, he tells the fort to surrender. Well, one of the guys in the wall, he just lets a rifle shot go, and that gives George his answer to that. I love Peter Kosky's song. There's a line in Peter Kosky's song where he says, they tried to breach the ramparts, they tried to burn the walls, they fought all through the night, but the fort refused to fall. So for 3 days they lay siege to Fort Henry. On the outlying areas, they slaughter all the livestock, they burn all the outbuildings, but they can't take the fort, manned by 18 men at their guns and the women running lead balls for them. So yeah, a bit of fascinating history there, and how capable a small fortress was in that time period. And I'm going to try to replicate it, so I'll take you a walk around and show you what I've got done. It's been a slow start, but I'm starting to see progress. Okay, I'm standing in what will be one of two blockhouses. So one will be right in this corner, 10-foot square at the bottom, 12 to 14 in the second story, so that allows them to shoot down the walls. It will, there'll be a palisade wall going along the back, palisade wall here. So this blockhouse will cover those two walls. So the north and the west wall, or east wall, and the one in the far corner will protect the south and the west walls. And then, of course, shooting ports all along the palisade wall. Before I do my walkabout and show you where I'm going with this, back to Fort Henry. So it's arguably the last battle of the American Revolution. Fighting's, for the most part, stopped along the eastern seaboard. There's sporadic fighting, but it's the last sort of siege, if you would. And at one point, the natives, because they couldn't breach the wall, and in their frustration with such a massive force and such a little force in the fort, they fashioned a cannon out of a hollow log. I don't know what they loaded into that thing, but instead of shooting the projectile or projectiles out of it, the thing explodes, and it killed a number, wounded a number of natives. I don't think it was ever recorded, the number. Anyway, a little bit of history. Oh, and the other bit of history, when old Ebenezer Zane, he starts building at the time Fort Fincastle, he has 400 militia helping him. Because Lord Dunmore War is breaking out. They know there's a lot of unrest with the natives, and they know a war is coming. So yeah, they give him 400 people to help. Well, you're looking at the crew here. So just I guess full disclosure, because I'm going to cover this as I build it, I may be using some modern devices, because there's just so much work to do, and I kind of like to have it done before I die, and yeah, anyway, we won't go there. But so from the corner of this blockhouse, which will be front corner of it, will be about here, almost up against the blacksmith shop, the wall will go just like this. And as I say, the top story overhangs, so there can be a person covering along the actual wall itself if someone gets close and is below shooting range. So the blockhouses protect for that. So let's take a little walk. This old birch tree here has faithfully supplied me my chaga for fire starting and tea for well, a decade or better, but it's declining rapidly. It has to come out. That'll be firewood. Nothing's going to go to waste here, well, other than brush, obviously, but all the material will either be used in the palisades, the doors, bridges. We're going to, in the interior, some things we're going to do, there'll be a couple of smaller cabins. Hopefully dig a well, although that sounds rather ambitious, possibly. Got to relocate an outhouse. It'll have a chicken coop, hopefully. It'll have a beehive oven, so there's a lot of work to do, but before I do that work, I got to get a wall around it. So anyway, we start here. This comes out, which opens up this wall for the blockade, or for the palisade wall. So I've cleared a lot of brush, and I'm starting to get a visual for it. I've piled so much brush here. Eventually I have to burn these, so I put them in individual burn piles. I'm going to start calling them beaver houses, because they kind of remind me of that. I'm a ways from it, but when this is all done, this is going to be gardens and fields around the fort, just as they would have had. So I have enough old rails on this property that I'll be trying to gather them, and it'll have a rail fence. Once the trees are out, the palisades up, a rail fence will be around the perimeter of the woodlot. And I might plant some wheat here and see if we can demonstrate how they actually made flour. But that's a long ways off. So this is my very own wilderness road, and as it comes in here, this will be the main entrance into the fort. And I'm not sure yet how I'm going to do the main front doors, but I may take the idea I got at Martin Station, where it actually pivots at above the height, say, of a man sitting on a buggy and his team of horses. to get underneath, and the door actually sits horizontal, and then when they have to fortify, the door swings down and is locked in place. Anyway, I'm going to play with that idea. But I should also point out too, because I spend a lot of my time in 18th century clothing and carrying accoutrements using 300-year-old technology, and you get yourself a wee bit of reputation with the locals and friends and neighbors and such. But when word got out that I'm building a fort, well, that's taken my reputation to a whole new level. Yeah, okay, I kind of like it. Anyway, down to the other blockhouse. Okay, I'm walking along where the south wall will go over to the blockhouse. That cluster will be log material for cabins, as will the one up there. So that clears that area, gives me building material. And this ancient old birch here, it's in perfect health for a tree of its age. So I want to save it. I don't want to disrupt the roots too much. Initially, I was going to put the palisade wall on that side of it, which would have meant less work and a smaller fort. But in order to preserve that tree, the wall will be somewhere about here, south wall, over to the other blockhouse. So my two-seater outhouse is actually outside of my fortification. So yeah, it doesn't do if you're being attacked to have to go to the loo outside of your protection. So I've got to move that, and it's in kind of a low spot anyway. So it'll go inside the palisade and up somewhere on that side hill close to a wall. I'm standing roughly where the other blockhouse will be, and worth pointing out that I did show the growth when we got back from our cross-country tour. I've actually found my smokehouse. So the smokehouse will also get moved in, and then, as I said, a number of other structures. This will also be a two-story blockhouse with an overhanging upper story, and then the wall is going to go right straight across to the far corner. Sadly, between the cabin and the little pond we have, but there really wasn't an alternative. I'll show you what I mean. Had I known at the time I built this that I was going to put a palisade around it, I would have oriented the cabin in a different direction. I'd have turned it 90 degrees with the veranda facing south instead of west. Anyway, it's still going to work. It's just the view of my little pond is gone. So I'm standing where there'll be a doorway in the palisade wall here in order for us to access water. I don't want to disrupt the little stream that feeds this, but the palisade wall will go across here, the corner being over there, going behind the primitive shelter with the reflector fire over here. The palisade wall will go along it to the blockhouse by the blacksmith shop. So there you have it, the plan for the fort. Enough lollygagging, I might as well get at it.